The Way of Kings, everyone. If you know me, I'm pretty well read in Sanderson at this point. Having started with some of his Cosmere standalones, Elantris and Warbreaker, I have since read some of his non-Cosmere YA works, as well as the entire Mistborn saga, as it stands now, which is 7 novels. And for the most part, I have greatly enjoyed all of these books, and Sanderson has become one of my favorite writers. But of course, there was a very, very large hole in this reading list, of course being the Stormlight Archive, which many consider to be his best work, his magnum opus. And it's not hard to see why, as this series has gone on to become one of the most prolific adult fantasy series of the past decade, and as far as ones without adaptations go, one of the most prolific ones of all time. So they had always been on my radar, but with them being so big, I'd never really carved out the time for them until now. And I just finished The Way of Kings. Let's talk about it. Is it really Sanderson's best work? Yeah, probably. This story is set on the planet of Roshar in sort of a medieval type setting, where the king of the kingdom of Alethkar has been murdered, leading the nation into an all-out war against the assailants. And then we cut to a few years later when Alethkar is in the middle of this war, and we follow a few key POV characters. One of them being Kaladin, a young man who went off to volunteer for war. Let's say some bad things happened to him on the battlefield, and now he finds himself sold into slavery. Another is Dalinar Kholin, the brother of the murdered king and uncle of the new one. Having to deal with the ongoing war and assassination attempts on his nephew are hard enough, but now he fears, due to strange visions he's been having, he may be losing his mind as well. And the last is a young woman named Shallan, who is far away from home, petitioning Yasna, the sister to the king, to become her apprentice. Shallan is well educated, a very skilled artist, and she has a lot to offer Yasna, who has been conducting her own investigations into certain matters. However, Shallan is not here to learn. She has quite an ulterior motive. How the story, and from what I understand this whole series is structured, is that we are constantly jumping between these 3 POV characters, with a few more minor ones sprinkled in every now and then. All of these stories take place sort of in their own little corner, but of course they are all heavily connected. What's unique about this series though is that each book has a bigger focus on a single character, where they take up about half of the chapters in the book as we get their complete backstory, up until the point where we meet them in this book. And in The Way of Kings, that honor goes to Kaladin. So while we have these 3 main stories going on, we also have Kaladin's backstory as well.
I am a surgeon!
Like a lot of great fantasy stories, The Way of Kings sort of covers multiple different points. And through these multiple characters, we get a diverse taste of it all. Whether that be politics, action, mystery, suspense. There's stuff in this book for most fantasy fans to enjoy. Being 1,000 pages, a lot of time in this book is spent, just world building and character building. Because not only is it a new world where you have to introduce all of these things, but there are a lot of complex things going on. And this led the book to be a bit of a slower burn than I was expecting. However, I do not mean that in a negative way. I think just coming off the Mistborn books, which are a lot shorter and have so much more action, I was really expecting something more like that. This is really a series that takes its time. Not every chapter will be moving the plot forward in crazy ways, as we are just spending time with the characters and learning about them. And it leads you to become very invested in all of their stories. I thought our 3 main characters here were absolutely excellent, not only having likable personalities, but very mysterious and interesting stories, and as more was revealed about these characters, I only became more invested. And with this only being the first book, there was still plenty of room for them to grow. But I actually thought one of the most interesting characters was more of a minor one. We only get a few chapters from their point of view, and that was Szeth. Not really a spoiler because it happens immediately, but Szeth is the one who killed the king. And he is a fascinating character with a very unique way of going about things. I think something that's really appealing about Sanderson's worlds that he creates is that a lot of ways they are familiar, like you have that sort of medieval style, but he always plays into the fact that they are on alien planets. They all have weird magic systems and weird creatures and lore and things that are just super original and unique. Mistborn was full of that stuff, and it is no different in Stormlight. Now, with this not being as heavy on the action. They haven't really gone in depth on the magic system yet. I mean, we've seen a lot of it. We've seen people do a lot of cool things, but it's not like Mistborn where they just really drill in the rules like at every opportunity. Here it feels a bit more mystical and mysterious, which I really like. One thing that I found very interesting about this though is that I kind of knew a lot of things that I feel like I shouldn't have known, and that's because I read all the Mistborn books. As you know, both series are connected, not really in its story, but just in its, you know, vast world. Like, I just know the nature of the Cosmere pretty well at this point, so there were certain things they were, like, teasing and, like, wondering about, and I'm like, oh yeah, I know how that is. Which was interesting. It's probably the same if someone has read all of Stormlight before Mistborn. I don't think, like, reading Mistborn really ruined anything for me at all, but it was just a really interesting observation I made. So yeah, the story continues. We're following all these characters. Sometimes their paths converge, you know, all that fun stuff. And I was greatly enjoying my time with it. Would I say it was my favorite Sanderson book at this point? Maybe? I think the moment-to-moment stuff I enjoyed a little bit more in the first Mistborn trilogy. However, then I got to like the last 100 pages or so, and I know Sanderson is known for this, planting some seeds throughout his books and then just going completely insane in the last part of it. With the reveals, the plot twists, the setup for the sequels. I knew this, and I knew in particular the Stormlight Archive was notorious for this. Yet still, I was completely floored by the sequence of events that conclude this book. It was just non-stop chapter after chapter of insane revelations that change everything I thought I knew about the book I had just read. All of these final chapters are so good that any one of them could have just been the end of the book and I would have been super satisfied, but it just keeps going. It keeps going. There's so much packed in to these last chapters. And not only did it recontextualize so much of what I just read, but it definitely pushed it over the top into becoming my favorite Sanderson book I have read so far. The payoffs to certain things were unbelievably good, and the setup for future events made me more excited than ever to continue with this series. So it's getting a big old fat 5 stars out of me. I wouldn't say it's as good as The Last Argument of Kings, which is my favorite read of the year so far, but it's damn close, let me tell you. If Last Argument was how you conclude a series in a perfect manner, this is how you start one, and I cannot wait to spend the rest of the year catching up. If you are unfamiliar with the series, just a bit of info, the 5th one is coming out at the end of 2024, and that is going to be the conclusion of like the first arc of the story. And then in a while, Sanderson is going to go back and write 5 more books. It's literally probably not going to be finished until the 2040s, so this is definitely one we will be following for an extremely long time. But if the quality stays this good, I mean, hell yeah, bring it on. So that'll do it. Thank you all so much for watching. Leave your thoughts on the Stormlight Archive, the Way of Kings in the comments down below, and I will see you all soon for another video.